All right, we are excited to be here for our first podcast episode and recording today. Our first guest is Mike Barger, who I'm going to let him introduce himself. I'm Janelle Best, one of the show hosts. I also have with me Diane Samples, and today we're going to be talking a little bit about the Southwest Meltdown and share some information on today's entrepreneurship climate, challenges, solutions, and preparing for the workforce of the future. So welcome, Mike.
Hey, Janelle, great to be here. Thanks for having me. This should be a lot of fun.
Yeah, we're definitely excited to have you on. We had the opportunity to meet in person just last year at our Changing the Game series event, where you talked a lot about crisis leadership, which is where I know that you have one of your many areas of expertise. And Diane was really great to make that introduction as well, because I know you guys have a little bit of background in history. And without further ado, I'm just going to let you just share a little bit about your background and who you are with those tuning in today.
Sure. So I am a local boy from the community. I grew up on the north shore of what was Big Crooked Lake, now East Crooked Lake. Howell High School, University of Michigan grad. I started to fly out at Livingston County Airport when I was pretty young. Gave some flying lessons here at Ann Arbor Airport when I was an undergrad, and then spent 13 years as a flight instructor, fighter pilot in the U.S. Navy. I actually ran the Top Gun school for a couple of years, the real one, not the one from the movies. We can talk about that if you would like. Left the Navy after 13 years, and with my brother Dave, who now lives in Ann Arbor, originally from spent more time in the Southfield area. But we started JetBlue together in 1999. We both spent 13 years there leading that company. I was our senior pilot. I ran operations, maintenance, and training. So I got to see the intersection of learning and doing, which developed a lot of my passion for trying to deliver very practical education. After 13 years at JetBlue, I started an education technology company in Philadelphia, ran that for 7 years. And for the last 7 years, I have been a professor at the business school here at U of M, teaching entrepreneurship and crisis leadership. That's my story. I'm sticking to it.
Take a breath.
All right.
That is pretty impressive.
I am so glad that you introduced yourself, because I have told people that, we're having Mike on our podcast as our first episode. And I always mess up like your entire resume. I'm just like, well, he's really impressive. So you're going to want to tune in, because he's got a lot of great information to share. Now, you mentioned and touched on a little bit about being a Top Gun trainer and all that stuff. Is it true that you've met Tom Cruise?
I have. We had our 50th Top Gun anniversary and reunion a couple of years ago. That was in 2019. And he actually paid us a visit while we were doing that reunion, and was very grateful for us, I guess, helping him start his career. He acknowledged that the first Top Gun movie was really his super first blockbuster breakthrough movie. And was very appreciative of what we do and what we stood for, and it was pretty cool.
That is super, super cool.
Yeah. Just a quick side question, being that it was the 50th anniversary, how many Top Gun pilots or instructors were there?
So the idea was all kind of living staff, and there were probably maybe 150 of us there. So it's a pretty select group for a 50-year school. And that's everyone that's still around. So it was certainly an honor and a privilege to be there among those folks.
Absolutely. So throughout your diverse career, this was a piece of it. What was your biggest takeaway, or kind of your most favorite part of that experience?
The Top Gun experience?
Yeah.
It is, certainly you're teaching in pretty much the highest stakes environment that you can imagine, right? So, you do a good job and you live, you don't do a good job and you don't. Also the most kind of dynamically challenging environment, right? So it's constantly changing. It's, lots of G's and lots of information input coming in. So pretty rewarding to teach an environment that's just so dynamic. And then add on top of that all the teaching takes place from another airplane. So you're not even in the same space necessarily with your students. And so you learn a lot about how to teach effectively in as challenging environment as you can imagine. So that all carried over into the way we set up training at JetBlue. I actually brought a few of my Top Gun colleagues with me over to set up JetBlue University when I was there. One of them is still running it today, which is pretty cool. And I approach teaching here at Michigan in a very similar way, with a lot of emphasis on kind of the really challenging environment that we have to conduct business in, environment that's changing all the time. And so how is it that we can kind of keep up with all of the changes going on around us and still run an effective business or manage our family effectively or anything like that?
And I imagine a lot that plays into that is obviously there were a lot of different egos and larger personalities that you're dealing with across the board. So bringing that to your students and being able to kind of bridge those gaps or kind of conform to how each person learns and how you need to lead them.
Yeah, I think it's, I really enjoy teaching students that have a lot of confidence, that feel like they've got a lot of experience and that actually feel like they have something to bring to the table. And so, in addition to just trying to be a good teacher and educator, it's also about creating space for those folks to contribute to kind of everybody else's learning. And that's why I'm a big fan of finding ways to help people learn from each other. So what you are doing in the Alliance and with these podcasts and these kind of community events, I think it's really important for us to find time to recognize that our peers and colleagues and friends and family, that they have some unique experiences and perspectives that we should find ways to kind of learn from.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I always say that even when you're going to conference, or just the peer-to-peer things, even in the course of my career, you just learn so much from each other, and that's when a lot of the best learning takes place. Is that diversity of thought, diversity of perspective, kind of being open and honest with that. It's really rewarding. So
absolutely.
Very cool. Would you say, is it fair to say that your two passions maybe are airlines and teaching? I mean, I don't know.
Yeah. So I've been an educator my whole life. So you listened, you've heard a couple of times now my career path, and it seems from afar like there isn't a connection other than maybe being in the air or the color blue. But I've been, I was a flight instructor teacher. I was a TA, teaching assistant here at Michigan as an undergrad. I then was a flight instructor in the Navy. I ran JetBlue University at JetBlue. I started an education technology company to teach there. And now I'm in kind of traditional academia. So I've been around, teaching and learning my whole professional career. And it just so happens that I grew up in an airline family, and so had access to aviation, and so that's where I've kind of directed my passion. But I would say teaching and learning is really my passion, and the fact that it gets to often be in a sexy kind of airborne environment is just a bonus.
Absolutely. So we prefaced the show today about that we were going to say and talk or address a little bit about the airline industry itself and kind of what your thoughts are on the Southwest meltdown. I mean, as somebody who kind of thrives in the crisis leadership arena, that seemed like quite the crisis there. So I'm going to kind of let you take it away, and I'd love to hear your thoughts and insight.
So one of the two classes I teach here at Michigan Ross is a crisis leadership course, and I've been running it for about 6 years. It's one of the most popular electives here for our students. I think that's largely because they see these kind of newsworthy crisis events all the time. And as they think about their next leadership role or future leadership roles, I think that's one of the things that folks are just naturally a little anxious about. How am I going to deal with those kinds of things? And so we have a lot of fun in the class. A year and a half ago, based on kind of the lessons that I learned preparing for this class, researching for it, and some of my own life experiences, I wrote a book, as you know, called High Stakes Leadership in Turbulent Times. And that book is designed to just help leaders think through, various aspects of being ready for and dealing with a crisis when it happens. I say all that to say at the very beginning of the book, I tell a JetBlue story from the President's Day weekend in 2007. So, turning back the clock 16 years now, And it was a big winter storm in New York, and all of our competitors had canceled all their flights, and JetBlue leadership got together, and we decided to try to fly because we thought we could do it safely. We thought we owed it to not only our customers, but to our employees and all of our stakeholders. And it turned out to be just a horrific disaster. And so the airline shut down for 3 days because of the storm, and then for 3 more days because we were so just sideways with where our people were, where our airplanes were, a hangar full of bags that got separated from customers who had their flights canceled. So it was just a terrible mess. Well, I tell this whole story in the beginning of the book, and then I go on to explain all of the lessons we learned and the things that we did with different groups of our employees, what we call crew members at JetBlue. And what really struck me about the Southwest meltdown here is that it follows almost line by line the story I tell in the book from 16 years ago. We were overly ambitious with our scheduling. We had underinvested in infrastructure. We had heard commentary from some of our work groups that, hey, we're pushing the operation a little too hard. Are we sure that we're ready for this scenario or that scenario? And part of what we learned from that whole misadventure was that we as a leadership team needed to be more aware and more connected with our stakeholders because they actually have a lot of value to add. Now, that doesn't mean we're going to do everything our stakeholders want us to do, because as a business leader, we couldn't run a business that way. But it does mean, it did tell us, and we did learn, that your kind of short-range crisis radar on things that might deserve more attention than they're getting, your stakeholders will be willing to tell you what those things are and what needs to be fixed. And if you follow any of the kind of the fallout of the Southwest Airlines story, there hasn't been a day that's gone by in the last couple of weeks where there hasn't been another article about the employees were telling leadership that this was the issue, or the pilot group knew that this was a problem. And so to me, the moral of this whole story is that we all as business leaders have this wonderful collection of stakeholders who have a kind of a vested interest in our success. They want us to do well because they value, the goods and services or the relationships that they have with us. And that extends all the way out to their willingness to tell us where we need to be doing a better job, where we need to think about, dialing this up or investing a little more here, or better understanding something, over on this side of our equation. So long road to a small house, maybe there, Janelle, but I think the lesson here that we can take away from these kinds of stories is that as business leaders, are we making sure that we're setting aside time to really understand not just what our stakeholders need from us, but where we might be able to serve their interests more effectively so that we can make those kind of business leader decisions, which can be really hard, especially for kind of, younger, earlier stage businesses.
And now a quick word from our sponsor, Brighton Ford. Brighton Ford is Livingston County's #1 volume dealer and is proud to be a sponsor of the Howell Area Chamber of Commerce. Brighton Ford has been giving back to our community for decades and is the place for all of your automotive needs. From their state-of-the-art body shop to their award-winning service department to their huge selection of new and pre-owned vehicles, they truly are your one-stop shop. Call them today at 1-800-NEW-FORD for exclusive chamber savings. Now is a great time to get on board with Brighton Ford. Thank you. And now back to our show. I love a lot of the points you made, and I think that that's really the irony of the fact that you the same story from 16 years ago. I love that.
Almost line by line. It was really pretty amazing.
I think, too, some of the challenges today as it relates to entrepreneurship and the different size businesses is that you spend so much time in a crisis keeping the plane in the air that you're not really sure where you're going to go, how you're going to land. You're not thinking about that. You're thinking about just kind of keeping things in flight. So right. I don't know if you have any advice or tips or tricks that you might be able to share to help people focus on that stakeholder piece of it and what you would suggest.
Well, certainly, using your analogy, you have to keep the plane in the air. So it is natural for any leader dealing with the crisis, and we all have had to deal with this pandemic as it's played out among the many crises that we've had to deal with. And so it's both natural and logical that we would want to kind of serve our own kind of close-in needs and requirements in dealing with this fire, right? That we obviously have to take care of ourselves and the things that are right immediately around us. The reality, though, of any crisis is that we are not the only group that is impacted by this thing that's going on, right? Our employees are, our customers are. Maybe there's, family members, maybe there's communities, maybe there's, community leaders or other business leaders. There's a much larger collection of stakeholders than immediately appear right in front of us while we're fighting this fire and doing our own thing. So the lesson, I think, for all of us as business leaders is that, yes, we have to do what we need to do to kind of get the fire put out. But as soon as we possibly can, we need to kind of expand our view to consider how this event or this series of events is impacting those other stakeholders and start communicating with them in ways that both kind of let them know that we're aware something's going on and we're doing something about it, and that starts to get some input from them on, how bad is this? How is this impacting you? What is it that would make this better for you? So that we can start to refill that bank of trust capital that we've been building up in our business. That's, I think, a really important lesson for all of us is that, yes, put out the fire, but as soon as we can, we need to start reaching out to a broader collection of people.
Mike, do you feel that, I know with the pandemic, it kind of brought crisis leadership to the forefront, but was this a kind of a movement, a shift in thought process with a lot of businesses prior to the pandemic, and we're just kind of hearing more about it? Or are you finding that the pandemic is what has caused businesses to step back and make those reflections and realize, hey, we need to really have these plans in place prior to something else happening?
Yeah, great question. I think there has been a movement over the last, 10 or 15 years more toward we can't just be thinking about our business from the, whoever has put money into the business. Right? It can't just be about the investors. If it's a private business, it's wherever the money came from. If it's a public business, you're going to have stockholders and the history of capitalism. Since 1970, this is Milton Friedman capitalism is, business is all about the shareholder, right? Is that we do what we do to make money for whoever invested in the business because business leaders are working on behalf of those investors. So there has already this last 10 or 15 years been a movement toward, well, actually, business isn't just about the money. It serves a community. It serves the employees that work for the business because they have interests and needs as well. It serves, the government people or folks that are, community leaders. It serves lots of different stakeholders, and every business has a kind of a unique collection of these stakeholders. So I think there has been a movement toward more, how do we serve a broader variety of interests than just our shareholders? But I do think, to your point, Diane, the pandemic was something really close to home that forced all of us, just as adults, to think about the leadership role that we play, not just in our businesses, but I haven't met too many people that don't have a story about that conversation with grandma or Uncle Joe or somebody that they had to say, this is what the vaccine program is all about. This is what wearing a mask and the science are all about. Now, wherever you stand on all of that, that's kind of up to you. But we all had to have those conversations with family members or neighbors or community members because we were making decisions that impacted, other people. You have to wear a mask in our store, or we're not going to open the store because we just, don't feel confident exposing our employees to, whatever's out there. When we have to start making decisions like that, it does force us to be a little more thoughtful about, I wonder how these decisions do impact other people. So I think, again, long road to a small house, maybe that'll be the theme of today's episode. I do think the pandemic has forced all of us to kind of look at this living laboratory of ours that we've been dealing with these last 3 years and think a little differently about what it means to be a leader, not just a business leader, but a community leader or a family leader. Interesting times.
Absolutely. It's multifaceted. I don't think that there is a secret sauce, so to speak. But,
no.
Yeah. So we talked a little bit about the pandemic. We've touched a little bit on the airlines. Do we want to talk a little bit, if you could share with us a little bit about kind of the preparing for that workforce of the future and today's climate of entrepreneurship, challenges that we're all facing. I know we had an economic forecast this morning. Things aren't looking great, but not as bad as we had anticipated. So, we always have to find that silver lining. So I'm interested to hear your thoughts on kind of those challenges, solutions, and what we can kind of forecast for the future of our workforce.
Well, I think I'll come back to the theme of just the importance of kind of the interests of a broader stakeholder population, right? I think it's easy for us as business leaders to think about kind of what are the most important things to kind of us as business leaders, right? How do we make sure we make money? How do we make sure we're delivering value? How do we make sure that, we can make our payments and do all of those things? I think the business of the future will continue to move toward a greater kind of interest in the perspectives of others. So you ask about the kind of the workforce of the future. Well, what we're learning through the pandemic are things like, well, maybe we don't have to have everybody at the workplace to contribute value to the business. The quandary that creates for many business leaders is, but I want people that are coming to my workplace, right? We've got a rental agreement, or we've got an office building that we're paying for, and we've got cube space or office space. I want people to come here because this is where we collaborate. This is where we do business. Well, that may be true. The challenge for your workforce of the future is that they're going to have options that may not require them to go to the workplace. And if that's something that they value greatly, the flexibility of working from home, or the flexibility of, start time and end time, or, 3 long days a week, or 7 really short days a week, or whatever their kind of preferences are, the workforce of the future is going to have options. And so if you are a business leader trying to build kind of the workforce that works best for you, you're going to have to recognize that your paradigms for what the workforce looks like may not fit perfectly with what your kind of workforce wants. And that doesn't mean you need to change necessarily your perspectives, but it may mean that you're going to have a harder time finding people that fit exactly what you want. You may have to rethink a little bit what it means to have an office building or a workplace. I think you're going to have a better story or a more compelling argument to say, well, Diane and Janelle, this is why we need people to come to headquarters and spend 2 days a week or 5 days a week or whatever it is, because this is how we're going to go about ABCD part of our business. Okay. And at the same time, those leaders need to ask Diane and Janelle, what are you really looking for out of your professional life? What do you value most? Do you value the having a dedicated workspace that's nice and quiet and well equipped, and the vending machines or the free lunches every day or whatever it is that you want? Or do you value the flexibility of working from home, or being around your family more, or being able to kind of
all of the above, Mike?
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
No, we want it all. I like the free lunch option every day. I don't know that I ever had that.
Well, there's usually a lot
to
of
put that on my list
at the chamber.
Yeah. So all of those things, whatever they are, and I just made up a bunch of stuff that I've heard from different places, those are the kinds of things that business leaders maybe in the past haven't had to give as much thought to, that if they really want to build the ideal workforce for their organization, they're going to have to start thinking about those kind of things. And that's different. Part of that's been driven by the pandemic, but Diane, back to your earlier question about kind of the evolution of kind of stakeholder awareness. There were lots of organizations pre-pandemic that were starting to explore this work flex kind of schedule, right? Do you want to do fewer days that are longer? There wasn't as much talk about kind of remote work as it was kind of, optimizing the schedule for your lifestyle. I think the pandemic just layered on top of that this question of, well, I don't know, maybe I don't want to come in ever to the workplace. Maybe I want to do everything from home. So that's going to be an interesting part of the conversation.
It seems like as we were coming out of the earlier stages of the pandemic, we were hearing that more companies were thinking of going more that way, where they were realizing that people can work at home. And now we're starting to hear that a lot of the larger companies, now that they've had a little bit of time to digest and kind of see what the new climate is, they're starting to, seems like they're starting to kind of rethink that option a little bit. Still, hopefully offering options, but maybe not as flexible as they were in the beginning.
I agree with you. What I'm not hearing from senior leaders, though, is we've decided it's actually better to have a more flexible workforce. They're making, those options available to people, but I'm hearing less of the, no, we recognize that this is better for our business, right? So I think we're in that early stage of, hey, we're doing this because we know we're going to either lose our people or there's going to be a lot of noise if we don't offer some of these things. What'll be interesting over the next, 2-3 years or so is business leaders deciding that it is actually better for the business to give people this degree of flexibility, to give them some ownership of the kind of work, life balance, if you will, that they really want. Does that make sense? That kind of the nuance there?
Yeah. I'm a little intrigued. So how will that be measured, I guess? So are you saying productivity or reduced overhead? All of those things?
So yes and yes to those two things, okay. Right? So, it won't take very long for business leaders to think, let me see, I have this, I have 4 stories in this big office building that is not cheap real estate. If people can be just as productive not here, that would save me some money when so there's a lot of real estate development, questions these days on what is the future, office home balance look like. I think this question of measuring productivity, measuring, work satisfaction, those kind of things, those are challenges that every business is going to have to work through. And in fact, this productivity question is one of the things that does tend to come up from senior leaders that say, I want everyone here. Well, why do you want them here? Well, one answer might be, well, because I just believe that's the right thing. Okay, well, that probably isn't a compelling enough answer. So we're going to have to do better than that. But when you dig a little bit, one of the next answers is, well, how will I know if people are working? How will I know that they're all in? Well, that does kind of raise the trust question, right? Which is interesting. There are some research studies that are just now starting to come out as we look at the kind of the later stages of the pandemic that actually suggest, maybe surprisingly to some, that people do tend to be more productive at home when they can, dedicate themselves to project work for certain periods of time. They say, for example, from noon to 2, I am all in on this thing. And they totally lean into it from noon to 2, and they are super productive. We're at the office, someone comes by, wants a coffee. Someone comes by, wants to chat. Someone comes by, an email comes in, the phone rings. So I know there are distractions at home and at workplace, but the research now is starting to suggest that actually people looks like they can be trusted and that they're actually pretty productive from home. So something to think about.
Absolutely. I appreciate your thoughts on that. And it's really great because it dovetails into our next guest on our podcast is actually going to be, she used to work for Microsoft. She owns CultureBee and specializes in people analytics. So it'll be a nice kind of transition to our next episode. So we appreciate everything that you've been able to share with us today, Mike. It's been very eye-opening and just fun conversation to an opportunity to learn from each other. And we appreciate you taking the time to come on. Before we wrap up today, can you share contact information? And then we'll also provide that in the show notes.
Sure. Anyone can reach out to me at just Mike at MikeBarger.com. So that's easy, right? Got a little website I put together when I wrote the book. That would be great. And I will get right back to you. If you have any questions, anything that I can offer, certainly my old home community, I am happy to support any sort of business interest that's going on there. These are really, really hard times. And sometimes it's just nice to have someone to chat with. So happy to chat with anybody that's interested.
Well, thank you. That is a very generous offer. Thank you.
Sure.
We
Great.
appreciate it. Thanks so much, Mike.
My pleasure. It's been great chatting with you all, and all the best of luck with your new podcast.
All right. Thanks. We'll be in touch.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Okay. Bye-bye.